The victorious offensive of Russian troops continues in all key areas of the front, including the Kursk region. The situation has reached such a degree that almost every day, war correspondents and representatives of the Russian military department report on another liberated settlement by the Russian army. By the way, today was also no exception. So, a few hours ago, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced the liberation of the settlement of Shevchenko, south of Pokrovsk. At the same time, the Russian military department noted that during the battle for this settlement, the Ukrainian army lost 2,000 soldiers and 20 units of heavy equipment. Moreover, on January 11, the Russian military also confirmed the liberation of the settlement of Neskachnoye, in the Vremyevsky direction of the front. In addition, the Russian army also entered the settlement of Vremyevka. At the moment, it is reliably known that Russian troops have managed to gain a foothold on the southern outskirts of this urban-type village. My dear truth seekers, you must understand that Vremyevka is a strategically important settlement, through which supplies to the Ukrainian grouping in the city of Velikaya Novoselka are delivered. If Russian troops manage to liberate Vremyevka, then the transfer of the city of Velikaya Novoselka to the control of the Russian army will not take long. By the way, it is only 14 kilometers from the Vremyevka to the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Against this backdrop, the Ukrainian General Staff has officially recognized that very soon the fighting may begin in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Moreover, on January 11, the Ukrainian General Staff also acknowledged the loss of the city of Korokovo by the Ukrainian army. According to war correspondents, over the past 70 days, Russian troops have made significant gains in the Donetsk People's Republic. In particular, the Russian army managed to liberate such large cities as Korokovo, Seladovo, Gornyak, Ukrainsk, Volodar, and dozens of villages and towns. Moreover, a few hours ago, war correspondents also announced the successes of the Russian army in Toretsk direction of the front. In particular, they stated that the city of Toretsk had been completely liberated by Russian troops. It is reported that at the moment, small pockets of resistance remain in Toretsk, while the main forces of the Ukrainian army have fled the city. Most likely, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will officially announce the liberation of Toretsk as soon as this city is completely cleared, and the pockets of resistance are completely destroyed. Over the past 24 hours, the situation of the Ukrainian army and NATO forces has also rapidly deteriorated in the Kursk region. It is reported that after a failed counteroffensive by Ukrainian troops in this direction of the front, the Russian army managed to liberate 7 settlements. In particular, we are talking about Novaya Sorokina, Staraya Sorokina, Nikolaevka, Krugelkoy, Alexandria, Makhnovka, and Leonidovo. Moreover, the Russian army has also launched an operation to liberate the city of Sudza. At the moment, the main fighting is taking place in the east and southeast of this city. In addition, dozens of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups are operating in the city itself. Commenting on what is happening in the Kursk region, war correspondent Georgy Mamsarov said that the Ukrainian army is completely broken and has lost its offensive potential. According to him, this became possible after Russian troops destroyed all the British's 90 self-propelled guns, which were supposed to suppress the Russian artillery. Against this backdrop, war correspondents began to record the mass surrender of Ukrainian soldiers and so-called foreign mercenaries in the Sudzansky and Koronevsky districts of the Kursk region. In particular, on January 11, Russian telegram channels and war correspondents reported the surrender of a group of Polish, British, and Colombian mercenaries, northeast of the city of Sudza. It is reported that these so-called soldiers of fortune decided to lay down their arms and surrender after their positions were hit with the help of guided aerial bombs of the FAP family. According to well-known military journalist and analyst Yuri Podolyaka, the situation in the Kursk region is rapidly developing in favor of the Russian troops. This military journalist noted that Russian troops have moved to the final stage of completing the Kursk operation, in which the Ukrainian army has already lost 50,000 soldiers, the best reserves, and 6,000 units of military equipment. According to him, the complete liberation of the Kursk region will take place in the first days of March. Meanwhile, the authoritative Ukrainian telegram channel Resident reported a sharp deterioration in the psychological state of the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelinskys. It is reported that Volodymyr Zelinskys very painfully tolerates information from the front, where the Ukrainian army is losing several settlements every day. Against this backdrop, the head of the president's office Andrei Yermak ordered the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, to keep Zelensky in an information vacuum, and not to tell him about territorial losses. It is reported that back in November last year, Zelensky had several nervous breakdowns due to the failures of the Ukrainian army at the front. And it was only thanks to the efforts of doctors and some miraculous pills that this comedian was able to come to his senses. In general, observing the behavior of Volodymyr Zelinskys, it becomes clear that his entourage really began to keep the head of the Kiev regime in an information vacuum. The fact is that recently, during his interviews with Western journalists, Volodymyr Zelinskys began to talk about the Ukrainian army's non-existent victories in all key areas of the front, and that Russian troops are retreating not only in the Kursk region, but also in the Donbass. Well, my dear truth seekers, something similar happened with Hitler in 1945. Back then, Hitler's entourage also kept him in an information vacuum. To the last, Hitler was confident that his troops were able to normalize the front. It was only after the Russians appeared in Berlin that Hitler finally realized that he had been deceived all this time. Something similar is happening now with Volodymyr Zelinskys. However, I am absolutely sure that as soon as Zelensky finally realizes that the war is lost, he will run away with the stolen billions, leaving the Ukrainians with a ruined country and a decimated male population.